Melbourne Musos Facechook live. And it's a bit of a heavy metal thing today. There you go. Hi, how are you? There it is. Yikes and away. My name's Quinlan, as I said, Melbourne Musos Facechook live, and I have some beautiful questions from beautiful people. Welcome to the show tonight. And what goes on is tonight's show is a bit about time and heavy metal time, because Markus Saastamoinen, you dirty double dipper, but you've only dipped once. You've asked me about Megadeth's first drummer, Samuelson, and especially the album Killing Is My Business, and Business is Good. And I love that title. Anyway, and Adam, you've asked me about that, and Adam Sanfilippo about Ringo and Phil Rudd and all that sort of stuff. So, three drummers quite far away from each other, really. But what it is they all have one thing in common. They are brilliant timekeepers, right, with their various styles. Now, Markus, I'll start with you because I started. That is a cut time. And what happens is with time, and I'll get stuck straight into it, because I'm going to get a bit complicated tonight. So what happens, am I dropping out here? Come on, Chris, there you go. What happens is when you're dealing with metal and all that, it's like a 4-speed gearbox, okay? Because what happens is one of the things about the rate of time and stuff, is that you deal with your beats like a gearbox. Now, what I'll do is I'll just tap away. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. There we have that. Now, if I was to play in minims, 2 beats each. Oh, pardon me. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. That's a half time, right? Normal time is based on crotchets. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. There it is there. Then, if I go to quavers, there's your cut time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. And semi-quavers gives you the blast beat. Notice that the whole time, there it is there, you've just got the same. See, half time, normal time, cut time. And then you're into metal cut time and all that sort of stuff. There you go. So then, I didn't do blast beats. There you go. There it is. So what goes on is it's like you've got 4 speeds, you see. So you've got, as I said, based on a minimum rate, 2 beats. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Normal time, crotchet beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Quaver time, cut time. By definition, jazz, of which Markus, you gave the mention that Samuelson, Megadeth's drummer, brought jazz and jazz fusion into thrash metal sort of thing. And he did, you see, it's a very interesting thing, because on past shows, what I've done is I've sort of done, you know, the country train beat, all that in past episodes, you know, yeehaw. But then, you know, you put your feet on the 2 pedals and get a swing boogaloo like Billy Cobham did on the Spectrum album, but then goes straight to Alex Van Halen with the Hot for Teacher beat, you see. So, don't you just love it when all these different disparate genres come together, sort of thing. And what goes on with that is that everything starts to be connected, you see. It's wonderful. It's magic. Anyways, so that's what goes on there. So what you've got is, I've just started this Facechook Live with setting out the parameters, if you will. Now, when we're talking about Megadeth and all that, and Gar Samuelson, I've got my little notes here for you, Marcus. So here we go. Gar Samuelson, he was born on the 18th of February, 1958. He's 2 years older than me. If he lived, he sadly passed away from liver failure on the 14th of July, 1999. Although there's a little bit of controversy about the actual date, because I looked it up, it was 14th, but then I saw a little doco and it said he died on the 22nd of that month or something like that. So maybe do a double check, but anyway, he's passed away at age 41, which is far too young. He's one of the most influential of thrash drummers because Megadeth is part of the Big Four, that kind of thing. You've got Metallica, sort of Metallica, and then you've got Megadeth, you've got Anthrax and Slayer, considered the Big Four of metal. And thrash metal at that. You had to be fast, you had to be good, you had to have stamina, you had to know your time, the way that I've just explained it, because one of the most defining sort of techniques or compositional techniques of thrash metal is that use of the aforementioned time. You start slow, you build up, bang, you're off, sort of thing, and that it's like a roller coaster ride, really, sort of thing. For my students, I often bring up Metallica's Disposable Heroes off the Master of Puppets album, because that's just a beautiful exercise in up and down, half time, cut time, normal time, all this sort of, it just goes all over the place. And the whole pulse is still there, sort of thing. But I'm not talking about Metallica, because Dave Mustaine was sacked from Metallica because he was drinking and gambling and doing all sorts of different things and doing lots of funny business. And he is quite the angry young ginger, aren't we all? Anyway, and basically what it is Mustaine got essentially fired from Metallica for essentially all of the aforementioned, he was quite, he wasn't a nice guy to be around and all that. Anyway, there you go. And his quote was, "I wanted to exact revenge on Metallica for sacking me," and that's a famous kind of feud, if you like, and all that. But Gar Samuelson didn't last too long. He did 2 albums. Killing is my business, and business is good. You got to do the evil laugh, because there is one on one of the tracks. On the title track, it's evil laughter at the end and all that. And then the second album is Peace Sells, But Who's Buying? And there you go. Great names for albums, really, isn't it? It incorporated jazz fusion into the genre. And then, yes, Gar Samuelson himself was fired for the aforementioned chemical amusement aid and all that, and it's very sad because he was such a great musician and talent, that kind of thing. When I had a listen, Marcus, to Killing Is My Business, the first track there was Last Rites, Love to Death, and I've got 2 types of cut time for you. You see, what happens is that when you're dealing with, say, just good old punk, holiday in Cambodia, so that's a bit of a punk thing there, and he does that. Then there's the metal punk. We've been in what's that, Rawhide? It was a heavy metal Rawhide, I think. On a sunny day. So that's what it is. Daddy left home when I was 3. And then what you got? You got to use your double kick. And then you've got all sorts of different things with the double kick there. So there's odd sock cam down below there, which I'll put up later on. As always, I'm doing it live to camera, live without a net, as they say. So if I screw up big time. Hey! You see.
Where's the kaboom?
That's right. If I do it, where's the kaboom? So, what happens when you're doing double kick? What often happens when you're doing blast beats and that kind of stuff there? You need to frame it into your different things. You know, like are you going to frame it into the aforementioned quavers, semi-quavers even, and all this sort of biz? When I'm doing this, they're sextuplets really, or fast triplets, but in cut time, you know, it works. Now, I've talked about cut time in the past, and of all the lessons I have to give, it's probably the most mathematical of definitions, I suppose, in music, in the sense that with cut time, cut common time, what you're doing is taking the notes and halving the value. So crotchets become quavers and all this. So what starts to happen, jazz by definition, is sort of it's really cut time. You see? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. This is what would happen if James Brown was playing for Megadeth. Get on up, you dirty bastard! 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 Shannon Boom Tish, if you're watching, there you go. And I've got that on my head. I didn't study that. I did that the other week. Anyway, but what happens is when we're when we're working on Love to Death and all that, there's a wonderful little thing because it mixes between the punk cut time, if you will. I'm popping. Hang on. There you go. Chest, test. And then of course. Like that. But then it goes, Markus, into a little 7/8. And there's a, like that. So, bing. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I know. Gina Lola Brigida, Gina Lola Brigida, Gina Lola Brigida. There you go. It goes into a little bit of a 7 thing with the riff, you see. So it mixes between cut time and 7/8, you see. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3. There's that little ingenious little breath that goes, and it's a little bit like when you see the footy fly up and it's like, oh, bang, and then the pack flies, you know, that kind of thing. It's got that wonderful little lilt sort of thing, and that's what 7/8 can give you. And that's the first one. And that's that business there, and that little chicken, like that, is in Killing Is My Business. It's almost like a funk soul-y kind of beat, like I've parodied a little bit there, but it's like bam. So like patum. And as everyone knows with the genre of heavy metal, a lot of heavy metal drummers have a lot of cymbals. They might have just a 5-piece kit, but then they've got half a dozen crash cymbals because everything's so, you know, they kind of, you know. My mate Luke, How are you, mate, if you're watching? From Panda Bar and all that. And he loves China cymbals and trashy stuff. With a gong. There you go, got to have a gong. And a bell. And there you have it. So it's lots of punctuation, you see. So there's all that. That's why you have lots of cymbals for that kind of genre, all that stuff. And there you go. I'm going to come back to that like I always do. And Marcus, I hope I've asked or answered your question somewhat. There's that. One of the funny things, to bring up Gar Samuelson's jazz background, let's say, in his jazz fusion background, is that with track 4, Looking Down the Cross, it's like a metal calypso in the middle section breakdown. So, you know, calypso is like bump. So. Like that, you know, sort of thing. Dance to that. There you go. And there's that. So there's a little, you can hear it. You can hear the jazz influence and what he brought. I mean, you know, when you're dealing with Megadeth and the you know, the big four, of which they're one of them, that was a new genre, mid-80s. Man, you had to be fast. Oof, still have to be fast, even faster now, you know, that kind of thing. And so that's what goes on. So to talk about that in my notes, I hope I've done everything there for you, Marcus. There you go. Got everything there, thrash and metal style. It's almost like gearbox style, right, with the rates you see. So you can, it's a little bit like you've got your Tirana, seeing it's R.I.P. Holden. You've got your Holden Tirana, and it's got a 4-speed gearbox. Oh, you know, not 3 on the tree. You got 4 on the floor, mate. Yeah, mate. Sick. And there you go. So what happens is that when you have a crack, you've got, say, the engine running at, let's say, 1200 RPM, mate. Yeah, no worries, mate. Yes, mate, we've got that going for you. It's going like, going smooth as a baby's bottom, it is. And there you go. And then what happens is as you go up the 4 on the floor gearbox on your Holden Tirana, what's going on there is that it's the gearbox that is sending you from 10k to 40k to 60k to fully sick k, mate, and then you get pulled over by the jacks in their divvy van, mate. You're going home in the back of the divvy van. You're going home in the back of the divvy van. You're going home in the back of the divvy van. You're going home in the back of the divvy van. I was waiting for the kaboom. There you have it there. So that's what goes on there. I've been very silly at the moment. Now, Adam, how are you, mate? You've asked me about 2 legendary drummers there, Ringo and Phil Rudd from Akadaka and all that, and their sense of time as well. So the whole night has been about a sense of how does it work. Now, one of the things that you brought up is asked about crossing arms, like this. Not really, Adam, no, because what happens is if you are playing like that, it would be, like a few of you out there are saying, how come he's doing bloody heavy metal with traditional grip? Isn't that the jazz grip and all that sort of stuff? But there you go. What happens is that it's a little bit like that. Do you see? You get that. That kind of thing. So you get that break, jailbreak, dirty deeds done dirt cheap, dirty deeds done dirt cheap. And it's all about the pop. I could do this, which is fine when you're starting out. It's no problem at all. But that ain't really Akadaka, is it? Do you notice that when you look at Phil Rudd playing, you notice he's got that, just that, like that. He's just got the groove, you know. And what happens with that groove how are you going to quantize the groove, you know, that kind of thing. And it comes down to what's in between. You can have 1, 2, 3, 4. But if you're doing it like 1, 2, 3, 4, well, nah. Yeah, but nah. Okay, so what happens is you want to swing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Have a look at Phil Rudd. Have a look in between. Especially when he's doing, say, things like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Now, people who, if you're just listening to the album, you just think it's a great song or whatever it might be, whichever song it is. But what happens is when you're actually seeing them, look what they're doing in between. They're not doing or anything like that, you know. There's the in-between. Now, when you're dealing with the in-betweens, what is the in-between going to be? Now, I've talked about rates and all that. That's fine. And what goes on with rate is, like I've just talked about, half time, normal time, cut time, blast beat, you know, that kind of thing. Blast beat is like a heavy metal polka, you know, like roll out the barrel. Let's have a barrel upon the hand. Roll out the barrel. Roll out the barrel. I love it. I love it all. Yeah, I'm sure I'm taking the piss a little bit, but hey, I hope you're smiling. I am. There you go. And that's what goes on there. Anyway, so what goes on now is that what is the rate you're going to do in between your beat? So you could have 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That could be fairly tight if that's what you want. You could do quavers, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Now do you hear the lilt? That's called the whip stroke, thanks to Sanford molar. So check out your molar technique, that kind of thing, where you get the accents there. Billy Cobham often talks about the days when he, by the time the 80s hit, and he was having to emulate the drum machine, you know, so of the time of the day, you know. So I used to call it Dutuditi. I was in a band called the Spiders of Destiny, which was the name of a Frank Zappa song. We're the Spiders of Destiny. And the band used to call this kind of stuff was it was almost. And I got really good at programming a TR-808. Does everyone remember the classic drum machine of the early 80s and all that? Put me out of many jobs, that kind of thing. But Billy Cobham used to talk about, instead of doing the groovy business, you'd have to go my sex, computer gates. Do you remember all those days? Oh, the early 80s. The Tirana was still around with the 4-speed. Yeah. No worries, Robbo. Let's go for a spin. Yeah. We got the drags down at Cherry Lane, down at back of Altona there. And then, what you have then is like, you could have a triplet, right? So if you're going 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1. I'm putting myself off with my Tirana joke. Yeah, pretty good there. Okay, so what goes on is there's that. And what happens is, this is where I will now go into Ringo a little bit for you, Adam, in the sense that what happened with the Beatles early on, okay, is the fact is that what they had, what is colloquially known as the Liverpool Jangle. And it's when you see them play live that you really get a gist for it, you know, that kind of thing. There was that doco a few years ago called 8 Days a Week that was on, and then they had the concert afterwards at Shea Stadium, which in the day was the biggest concert, you know, broke all the records and all that. And that was when I went, oh, look at what he's doing there. It's a 4 on the floor and all that. And it's just brilliant. Ringo stole the show at that concert. And what it is when you take things like, she loves you, yeah, 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 and all that sort of stuff. What you're hearing is, when I say a Liverpool jangle, of course, as everyone knows, the Beatles came from Liverpool. And the history of the Beatles, this is a thing that everyone should, I hope, would remember as far as their history. But before they really hit it big, they spent 6 months playing in what was essentially a strip club for sailors in Hamburg in Germany. And they did like 11 sets or whatever it was a day, 3/4 of an hour, 15 minutes off, all this sort of business. For the sailors, they only had a few hours, and basically they were in this Hamburg club. And when you do things like that, you get good. You get good. So they went away. They were playing the Cavern Club and all that stuff with Jerry and the Pacemakers and Johnny Kidd and the Pirates, I think, and all, just early 60s, sort of thing. 60, 61, 62. But then they went away to Hamburg, and then they came back and they were that much better from all that work they did. And what happened is one of the things that they developed was Ringo had this wonderful clipped shuffle sort of thing. So here's a shuffle. It's like that. You could see it on that doco at Shea Stadium. It's like, it's tight. But you know what? George Harrison was playing straight, you see. So you had almost like the hemiola from Española, sort of thing. My old joke, the old jokes, many of you know them already. Hemiola. What the hell's a hemiola? Sounds like something you need a cream for. So what goes on with that? Oh, it's tired now. I've got to change that joke. Anyway. But George Harrison's playing straight. Like that sort of stuff. So what happens is you had this jangle between the two. There's two that I listen to I've got them everywhere, but I've been listening to them since I was a kid. My nanny, Carol, used to sing She Loves You when I was a little bub at the pub and all that. So even at Kinder, when the Beatles came out in 64, we're all singing it in the playground and all that. She loves you, yeah. Yoicks and away. So, but it was, so there you go. But what happened was you had this jangle about it, right? And the other one, so I double-checked, and I've gone, that's what they're doing. Yep, no worries. It's almost like a hemiola, where Ringo is playing a shuffle based on 3, right? But it's a bit clipped. And then George Harrison was playing straight rhythm, or it might have been John, or whatever. But when you're dealing with the other song that I wanted to bring up was Help. It's a tight shuffle again, but every time Ringo goes, it's a straight 8 kind of build, you see. So you're jockeying between triplets and quavers, you see. And what happens also is that when you're dealing with certain kinds of, say, jazz, see how that's... but I could clip it. See, it's changed the tone, you see. So on, you see. So what happens then is you've got time inside time, you see. Because you can deal with the time signatures, whether it's cut time or normal common time, when we're going back to, say, Megadeth, all that. But then you can have what's inside that time. How are you going to approach beat 1 to beat 2? And this goes back to something that I loved from Leonard Bernstein, the classical composer, when I was coming up and doing all my orchestration studies back in the day. And there was this beautiful program on Channel 2, Arts Sunday, that kind of thing. And they had this doco on Leonard Bernstein. He was brilliant. I loved Leonard Bernstein. West Side Story. When you're a jet all the way. Markus, remember last year? And there's Alice Cooper for you, Andrew. 'Cause he did a cover of this. When you're a jet all the way from your first cigarette to your last dying day. Getting that Tirana with the 4 on the floor. doing this sober. Anyway, so what's going on is that even with that, Leonard Bernstein said, well, you can have one note. That's one note. But as soon as you go to the second note, that's when the magic happens, you know, that kind of thing. So I could do this. What does that mean? You see. But if I go... There's your kaboom. Now it means something. Probably means something silly. It's building up, is it? There's your kaboom. So what happens then? You can get really loosey-goosey with everything and start to get a really cool one. Kaboom. There you go. So there's something about everything there. Adam, I'm talking about that with She Loves You and all that. How did I go from Beatles, Ringo and She Loves You, yeah, yeah, to where's the kaboom and doof? There you go. So what happens is then you can actually quantize inside each beat, you see. I should start wrapping the show up. I hope you enjoyed everything. It's a bit crazy, but that's all right. Anyway, so there you go. So what goes on now, if I start to finish with something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. With Phil Rudd. One of the things about AC/DC, look who they had on guitar, Malcolm and Angus. And what they would do, syncopate. You're starting to wait for that, aren't you? Because that's the little catch cry at the end. Now I just started with that. Playing against each other now. There you go. So there's my show tonight. I hope you enjoyed what I did in the most silly of fashion there. But what happens is that when you're dealing with time, what happens is there's ways to get in, out, around. It's fabulous. It's a wondrous thing. If you actually go and just do maths and you do little problems, like if you're dealing with someone, people doing laps of the oval, you see, there's always a point where the fast runner will hit the same point as the slow runner if they keep doing that. When you're watching the Olympics or anything like that, they'll come together. Now, given that everyone's running at an even speed, that's what a polyrhythm is. That's the essence of it, because I was just doing that. That sounds like nothing much at all. It's just splash hats, crotchets. But when I started to do things like now, if I take that away and I just came on and just went, that means nothing, you see. But because I've set it up, that's Lenny Bernstein. Polyrhythms are my business, and business is good. I'm going out the way I went in. And there it is. Now I'm off. Oh boy, what a show tonight's been. Samuelson, thank you, Markus, for bringing him up. One of the most influential of thrash drummers and all that. Killing is my business and business is good. What a name for a title, or what a name for an album there. It's fantastic. Anyway, so what I'm going to do now is thank everyone. Hang on, where am I going here? There it is. So, where am I? Markus, thank you very much. There you are. Adam, thank you very much for your... I hope I've answered your questions in a crazy kind of way. With Ringo and Phil Rudd. With Ringo, I mentioned She Loves You as the Liverpool Jangle and all that stuff. And Andrew, you asked about Alice Cooper last week because he's in town and he's fantastic and all that. I should by rights just quickly go. Hey! Whoa! Hey! $1 billion babies. Here in the sky. Comes off in my hand. There you go. Oh, I did it last year though for you, mate. There you go. So I'm double dipping. Andrew, you're double dipping, not Markus. Anyway, there you go. So there's all that. Killing is my business. Yes. There it is there. Okay. Adam, there it is. Ringo, help. Go off and have a listen. You'll hear the jangle, the Liverpool jangle. And when you're listening to Akadaka, watch Phil Rudd play. He's been in a bit of trouble over the last few years for the aforementioned chemical amusement aid. But what it is, in the glory days of Akadaka, for me in the 70s, he got out with a bullet in his back and all that. Just watch him. Watch him betweens. Watch his flow. The flow and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, I'm out of here. I'm probably going to go off and have a bit and all that stuff. And thank you for watching. I've sort of gone overtime at my usual kind of overtime time and all that, and told that tonight's whole show is about time. And thank you all for watching, hey? Fantastic. Here we go. I'm off. Take care. Oh. Hey. Oh. And away. Here we go.
And away! And away!